One of the best aspects of Code Geass is the nightmare frames. They're a nice addition to an already complex and interesting story. I'm not going to discuss here if Code Geass is more accurately described as a show about politics and strategy that happens to have mechas, or if it's a mecha show with strategy and politics. I know the fans have debated this for quite a while. But what matters to me is the fact they're in the story in general and they enhance it, and I enjoy it no matter what the genre actually is. I have read many critical responses to the Code Geass manga, which, if you do not know, came out after the anime. Code Geass is actually unique in that respect, in that it didn't have an original source material. But the point is, the fans who read the manga didn't like the fact that nightmare frames were removed from it. So I get the impression that most people who like Code Geass also enjoy the nightmare frames as well. At some point, I would like to discuss the evolution of the nightmare frames in Code Geass, but in this video, we're keeping it basic and just going over my favorite nightmare frames. And unlike CBR, I don't have the audacity to throw out a simple power list of the strongest nightmare frames, since there are so many factors to consider when discussing a topic like that, probably more than I ever even thought about it. And by the way, CBR actually made an article discussing the strongest nightmare frames and the pilots, and I debunked it in one of my videos many months back. I will leave it in the description below. Instead, this list is going to go off personal preference. We're talking color schemes, weapon, overall design, importance to the plot, and other factors like that. Like my top women in Code Geass, I couldn't keep this list at 10, so there's going to be 15 nightmare frames instead. And also, like my top women in Code Geass, I'm still burned out. This is another fun video I wanted to do. Another fun listicle that you guys seem to enjoy. If you're wondering what's actually coming out in the near future, I'm working on the review for Renya of Darkness, and I'm also doing analysis on Lelouch, if he's a villain, hero, or anti-hero. I've actually had some discussions with people on Reddit and other social media sites about that, and I figured that'd be a fun video to talk about. A couple house cleaning items before we begin. My list will cover nightmare frames from the spin-off mangas, the original anime, films, and the OVAs, and of course, expect some spoilers from each. And one final request: if you enjoy the Code Geass content and want more of that and other anime content in the future, please subscribe to the channel. I'm getting close to 1,000 subscribers, and I would like to hit that milestone soon. I'm gonna come clean here. I really want that community tab. With that out of the way, let's go over my top 15 nightmare frames in the entire Code Geass universe. Number 15. Christopher Chamberlain, the Knight of One from Renya of Darkness. Depending on who you ask, this might count as cheating, since the nightmare frames in Renya of Darkness are different from the other nightmare frames in the Code Geass universe, at least in the original timeline, because it's pretty crazy in Nightmare of Nunnally, but that's a whole nother topic for another time. But Dash calls them nightmares, so I'm going to treat them as such. While I don't think the choice to make the nightmares enhance humans worked in Renya of Darkness, I can't deny that the new characters created as a result were awesome. My favorite of the new nightmares is Chamberlain, who was turned into one by Dash, like the other nightmares in Renya of Darkness. He is a gigantic monster with impressive regenerative abilities. Even with the combined power of Renya, Alto, Pavlo, and Waterboy, they still struggled against him in battle. Renya of Darkness has many slow parts to it, but this was not one of them. Even though Christopher's design did not make sense for a Code Geass story, I still enjoyed it. His raw power and commitment to Britannia only second to Jeremiah, and it added more depth to his character. I felt bad after learning that Christopher didn't even want to become a nightmare by his own volition. His brother tricked him and then used him, and that's Christopher, the hulking monster who will defend Britannia from all, and the Knight of One. Since he's not a typical nightmare in the traditional sense, I'm keeping him here at number 15, which I think is fair, and that was Christopher Chamberlain. Number 14. The Landslide Albion from Lelouch of the Rebellion. I might get hate for this, but I don't care. The Lancelot is my least favorite nightmare frame in Code Geass. Now, I want to preface when I say I don't like the Lancelot, I'm only talking about the Lancelot that Suzaku uses and the upgraded versions of that one. For example, I do like the Lancelot Frontier, which is used by C2 at the end of R2. The reason why I chose to put the Albion on here to begin with is that even though I dislike the Lancelot as a whole, it was my favorite among the different upgraded versions. What always impressed me about this nightmare frame was its power. Suzaku in it was able to take out whole armies on his own, including the Knights of the Round. One of the keys to its power is Cecile's energy wings, which fire projectiles and allow the nightmare frame to move quickly in combat. Side note, I really like the green color used for those wings. It helps it stand out from the standard color scheme of the other Lancelot versions. And while we're on the topic, the Lancelot does have impressive features, my favorite being the Macer vibration swords and the Varus cannon. And if you're wondering, I also like the Lancelot Sin and the Lancelot Zero from Lelouch of the Resurrection, but even among those new models, the Albion is still my favorite. So overall, not my favorite nightmare frame, but I can't deny that when Suzaku piloted this monster into combat, you knew business was about to pick up. That was the Lancelot Albion. Number 13, the Sutherland from Lelouch of the Rebellion. The Sutherland is the classic Nightmare frame that we see in the original anime, whether it's the base version or the fly-enabled version, or even the one that Jeremiah used towards the end of R2, and his upgraded one in Luch of the Resurrection. This Nightmare frame comes after the Glasgow model and was based on it. The Nightmare frame comes equipped with the standard stuff you're used to seeing. The standouts to me are the gauntlets it has for close range combat. Now these gauntlets are obviously no match for a mace or vibration sword, but for most scenarios, it's good enough. The Sutherlands might be the most iconic Nightmare frame in all of Code Geass, and definitely nostalgic in my case, and that's why it made the list. Number 12, the Nagechu main from the Luch of the Resurrection. Shalio, the head of the military in Zilkstan, and Shamna's brother, pilots this supposed first 10th generation Nightmare frame. There are many interesting elements when it comes to this Nightmare frame. Let's start with the design. My immediate thoughts when looking at this Nightmare frame was King Leonidas I, who is known for fighting off the Persian army with only 300 Spartans. Speaking more generically, it looks like a Spartan warrior, and that makes sense because it sure fights like one. Instead of advanced weapons like the Hadra Cannon or the Radiant Wave Surger, the Nagechu main fights up close using swords and its shoulder-mounted Harkins. It does have a machine gun for long-range combat. The Nightmare frame was clearly designed for close range. By using the ability called Megisto's Omega, it can move even faster and create after images, which is something we see in other characters in anime when they also travel very fast. It's basically the Code Geass version of the Trans Am from Gundam 00. The float system is built into its body instead of a wing-like design like in most Nightmare frames, which adds to its really cool look when it's flying. And while I didn't like the pilot, the rumored first 10th generation Nightmare frame did not disappoint. It has a very unique design that stands out from the rest. It's really cool, but the pilot does bring it down lower, which is why it's only number 12 on the list. It does have awesome theme music as well. That was the Nagechu main. Number 11, Zero's Burai from the Luch of the Rebellion. Zero's Burai, much like the Sutherland, is an iconic Nightmare frame in the Code Geass universe. There are so many iconic scenes, Port Yokozuka, Narita, the casino to start R2, and etc. that involve this Nightmare frame. It always amazes me how many times the Luch can trash this thing during combat. And that's all thanks to, of course, Suzaku Kudarugi. I love the horns they added to the head to show that this is Zero's and he's in charge of the Black Knights. I don't mention the Burais on this list, so it's good to note that they themselves are kind of cool. They're the Japanese equivalent to the Sutherlands, and the fight between the two was really epic in the anime. Even though Lelouch replaces the Burai with the Gawain in stage 19, it will still always go down as an iconic Nightmare frame in Code Geass. I mean, they did bring it back in turn 1, and Lelouch used it until turn 11, and that's why it is number 11. Number 10, the Alexander Liberté from Akito the Exiled. Anna Clement, childhood friend of Layla and fellow W0 member, created the Alexander Nightmare frames. When I first watched Akito the Exiled, I will admit these Nightmare frames annoyed me. They looked like pieces of junk when compared to the other Nightmare frames we've already seen in this universe. But when I thought about it more, I started to grow an appreciation for these Nightmare frames, and one of the reasons why is their ability to transform into what I call beast mode and travel on all fours. This is useful both in and out of combat. While in combat, this creates so many awesome battles where you can see that Alexander's changed the mode on the fly to gain an advantage over foes. It also makes it more intense and physical. The simple design allows it to move faster than most Nightmare frames, allowing them to take out multiple enemies in close range combat. The speed design also comes in handy for taking out enemies from afar, since a pilot can take a shot and get out of there in a hurry. Now, the Nightmare frame I'm talking about in particular is the final model that Akito pilots at the end of the series. Each member of the W0 unit got a custom Alexander, and Akito's is my favorite. What drew my attention is the awesome color designs, the cool horns on the head, the awesome rifle, and the large katana blade it has for its weapons. Akito used it in the awesome battle against Shin to close Akito the Exiled, while he was in the Vercingetorix. And that's why this model always stuck out to me. But you could put any of the Alexanders or all of them because they are so freaking cool. And that was the Alexander Liberty. Number 9, the Vincent from the Luch of the Rebellion, specifically appeared in R2. Rollo Lamperouche is the first to pilot this Nightmare frame. Eventually, Britannia created new versions called the Vincent Command model. Both Suzaku and Guilford would pilot these new models. And near the end of R2, the foot soldiers would pilot yet another version called the Vincent Vard. For some reason, when they made these new versions, they took away the nice gold and red color scheme in favor of the traditional Britannian blue and purple. The Vincent has an awesome design. It was developed from the Lancelot, which is obvious when you compare the two side by side. In my opinion, just from an aesthetic perspective, it improved on the Lancelot. I prefer the nice bright gold and red colors and the circular horn over the white and muted yellow from the original Lancelot. And then there's the weapons. While not the most powerful, they are impressive. It's a master vibrant swords which can be combined into a single lance. The first scene with the sniper frame was awesome. It looked so badass in the darkness when it emerged to fight Colin and Utterbeg. So not the strongest sniper frame in Code Geass, but from a design point of view, it's one of my favorite in the series, and I think number 9 was an appropriate spot. Number 8, the Vercingetorix from Akito the Exiled. This nightmare frame is one of a kind for so many reasons. Like the Tristan and the Shinkiro, it can transform, but not into Fortress mode, more like something I like to call Beast mode, much like something from Beast Wars. By the way, that was one of my favorite shows of all time when I was growing up as a kid, every Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m. on Fox Kids. But anyways, let's get back to the Vercingetorix. Just like the Alexanders, while in beast mode it can still fight. Its beast mode resembles a centaur, which is a half-man, half-horse creature from Greek mythology. Due to the CGI, it's sometimes hard to see the beauty of its design when it's moving. The Nightmare Frame's user is Shin Hyuga, Akito's older brother, and the head of the Order of Michael. And as the pilot of the Vercingetorix, he has access to powerful weapons. A shotgun that retains the same color and scheme as the Nightmare Frame itself, an impressive axe. It has unusual design with connecting gears that spin the blade. It's very strange. It looks kind of hollow, but it's pretty powerful. It also has a blaze luminous sword, which Shin used towards the end of his fight against Akito. I love how this Nightmare Frame looks like a beast and fights like one. It even makes an animal-like sound when traveling and transforming. It was impressive the way that Shin was able to fight all the W0 members at once. In future Code Geass installments, I hope we get more unique transforming Nightmare Frames, just like the Vercingetorix. And for all the flaws of Akito the Exiled, this Nightmare Frame was not one of them. It was one of the brighter spots. It could have ranked higher on this list. I really enjoyed it a lot, but I think 8 is a good spot for it. Number 7, the Gawain from Lelouch of the Rebellion. This Nightmare Frame is the one that Lelouch steals from Schneisel in Stage 19 to help him and Colin escape Kamina Island. One of its unique features is the co-pilot seat. Lelouch tends to sit in the upper spot, while C2 does most of the driving in the lower spot. The Nightmare Frame is gigantic and towers over even the 7th generation frames like the Lancelot or the Gurren. Its main weapon is the Hadric Cannon, which when completed could destroy any Nightmare Frame out there, and it's one of the reasons why the Gawain spec-wise was the strongest Nightmare Frame from Stage 19 to the end of R1. It can shoot out each finger that's connected to the Nightmare Frame through cables. It's been shown to cut a Nightmare Frame to pieces or allows it to grab onto another frame while in combat. It also is the first Nightmare Frame shown flying with a float system, and even the Lancelot's float system in Stage 20 was an attachment, while the Gawain's was built in. During the Black Rebellion, you can see this impressive monitor that shows all the units of the battlefield in the spot where the pilot sits, in this case BC2. I also like the color scheme and design. Again, this is a big boy with a nice black and yellow design, and it's quite intimidating. Lelouch, while inside the Nightmare Frame, shared many interesting conversations with C2 during the many conflicts in R1. It was hard to find a spot for the Gawain, not because I didn't like it, but because it's such a good Nightmare Frame. It was just so hard to pick it over others, so I thought 7 seemed appropriate, but I can see why some people might think it's higher. It is one of the most popular Nightmare Frames in all of Code Geass, and that's for a good reason. Number 6. The Lancelot High Grail from Oz of the Reflection. I have not read all of Oz of the Reflection since I cannot find a site that has the entire translated manga. If anyone does have a link, please leave a comment below. One person has, but it still isn't the complete story. The reason why I am familiar with it though is because I watched a video that summarized it, which I'll link in the description below if you're interested. So I don't know everything about this Nightmare Frame or the others in this manga. But despite this, I still wanted to choose one Nightmare Frame. So I chose the High Grail over the Goka Byakuin, which is piloted by Aldrin's twin brother, Orpheus. So much of the reasons for choosing the High Grail were based on its design alone. Despite not liking the original Lancelot design, I do like the variants of it, including the Vincent and the Lancelot Frontier. Well, now you can add the Lancelot High Grail to that list. It's actually a combination of the Vincent and the Lancelot into one, and the results are incredible. I love the color combination of red and gold, and I'm glad they retained that, unlike the variants of the Vincent that came out later. Besides the standard Nightmare Frame abilities, it can fly using a float system and has 4 awesome swords that are stored on the sides of it. And for what I have read in the manga, it's extremely powerful on the battlefield once older and gets the hang of using it. Even though Oz's reflection has not been animated, we do see the High Grail in action in the third film of the alternate universe, Glorification. Even from the limited knowledge that I have, I was impressed by this nightmare frame, and I look forward to reading more about it in the manga someday, if it ever gets fully translated. But that was the Lancelot High Grail. Number 5. Cornelia's Gloucester from Lelouch of the Rebellion. Much like the Sutherland and Zero's Borai, Cornelia's Gloucester is an iconic nightmare frame. They even made a brand new version of it in Lelouch of the Resurrection. It's really cool, but I never understood the elf-like ears on the head. It must be an aesthetic thing. Through Code Geass, once Cornelia became Viceroy, the nightmare frame was a symbol of Britannian power. Every time Lelouch tried to fight Britannia, the royal guard led by this nightmare frame would be present, and was one of the reasons why Lelouch lost many battles. And it's not just Lelouch, even the JLF took heavy losses from encounters with this nightmare frame. The Gloucester itself is like the Borai or the Sutherland, in that it only has standard weaponry and features. What sets it apart is the weapon it carries, which is its lance and the large submachine gun. But really beyond that, the nightmare frame is so powerful because of Cornelia herself. She's one of the best nightmare frame pilots in Code Geass, and the way she pilots that Gloucester is the reason why. For its iconic look and being piloted by the Witch of Britannia, and one of my personal favorite women in Code Geass, the Gloucester earns the number 5 spot on the list. Number 4. The Shinkiro from Lelouch of the Rebellion. When making this list, I was having a really hard time with the Shinkiro and the Gawain, since both belong to Lelouch, and I really liked both, and I think most of the fan base feel the same way. I ended up ranking the Shinkiro higher because I value its fortress mode over the Gawain size and Hadra cannon. Now, Rakshana used parts from the Gawain to create the Shinkiro, which does explain some of the resemblance it has to it, but it's mostly different. Let's start with the design. It only has one passenger seat, but the cockpit is large enough for 2 people to fit in it. For example, Lelouch climbed in when Rolla was piloting it in turn 19, and in the film Glorification, Jeremiah talks to Lelouch inside the Shinkiro. The Shinkiro's best feature is its luminous blaze shield, which is the strongest of any nightmare frame. And being that Lelouch is the leader of the Black Knights, having the ultimate shield makes sense here. It also fits Lelouch's fighting style, which is less hand-to-hand combat and more staying back and relying on long-distance weaponry. And as Rollo pointed out, calculating the shields is very difficult, which again is why it fits Lelouch, since he favors intelligence over hand-to-hand fighting. The Shinkiro can transform into a jet, which is called Fortress Mode. It can travel both in air and underwater, a feature which Lelouch takes advantage of in this series. I love the new Hadra cannons, which can be fired from the wrists instead of the long continual beams like the original Gawain. It's now single energy balls. The other weapon is interesting as well. The Shinkiro can fire a prism-like object, then fire a blast which reflects off that and hits everything around the battlefield. The Shinkiro is one of my favorite nightmare frames because it's part of so many memorable moments in R2 and has so many cool features. Plus, I love how Lelouch stands on it before the battle against Schneizel in turn 23. I forgot to mention that he did the same thing on the Gawain on his way to the Special Administrative Zone. But anyhow, that is why the Shinkiro is number 4 on the list. Number 3. The Gurren Satan 8 Elements from Lelouch of the Rebellion. The Gurren Superlative Extruder Interlocked Technology Exclusive Nexus 8 Elements is the final variant that we see from the Gurren models in the original anime. The Gurren is one of my favorite nightmare frames since its debut in Stage 10 when it was the Mark II model. The design always stood out to me, especially the head as well as the arm that used the Radiant Wave Surger. The vibrant blade is also quite cool as it was a dagger instead of a sword like the Lancelot. There are some that don't like the pilot seat, as it seemed like it was only created to give the audience suggestive angles of the pilots during combat, and Rakshai used the same design in the Gekkas and the Katskis later on. While I never liked some of the angles, it doesn't ruin the experience of watching the series, nor does it change my opinion of the Gurren itself. Now, I chose the Gurren Satan 8 Elements because it's the strongest version of the Gurren in the original series, and in my opinion the coolest. It has insanely powerful weapons and can move at lightning-like speeds. And like the Albion, it has energy wings. But unlike the Albion, they don't appear to fire any projectiles. At least I never saw it. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. The wing both serves as a shield and assistant to helping the Gurren fly. The arm got the best upgrade, which is saying something considering the Gurren Flight Enabled version arm was impressive as well. It could fire 2 different Radiant Wave Surger blasts. This new arm can do that as well, but what makes it more powerful is its range. It can detach from the Nightmare frame from a long string/cord and hit multiple targets with the long Radiant Wave Surger blast. During the Battle of Tokyo 2, Colin took out over 40 targets at one time. For being one of the strongest Nightmare frames and belonging to one of my favorite characters in Code Geass, the Satan 8 Elements earns the number 3 spot on the list. Number 2. The Tristan Divider from Lelouch of the Rebellion. Even though I'm specifically discussing the Tristan Divider, I also really like the original Tristan model. You can't go wrong with either one. I'm a bit of bias in this one because I really like Geno's character, and thus the Nightmare Frame that he pilots. The Nightmare Frame from a design point of view is so badass looking. I like how they combine parts of the destroyed Galahad to create it. It retains the same functionality as the original Tristan, which means it can go into Fortress mode. This reminds me of how the Union Flags, or Kyrios, works from Gundam 00. The main pilot of the Union Flag, Graham Aker, also happens to be a cool blonde guy. Coincidence? I think not, but let's get back to the Tristan Divider. So the upgrade not only made it look cooler, but also increased its power. While piloting it, Geno could easily take out the Shinkiro and gave Suzaku a good fight while in the Landslide Albion. The Tristan Divider has two swords that were created using the halves of the Excalibur that Suzaku sliced in two during his battle against Bismarck. When you take the new design to mind and the fact that I really like this pilot, the Tristan Divider easily makes the number 2 spot on the list, and from a aesthetic point of view, it's just the coolest looking. Before we get to number 1, here are my honorary mentions. These are awesome Nightmare frames that never got a spot on the list, but I also like them equally. The Glaskull, and specifically Collins, has a special place in my heart as one of the first Nightmare frames we ever see in combat. In Akito the Exiled, many members of the Auras of Michael, including one of my favorite characters in Code Geass in general, Jean-Rau, use the Grachus, which resemble the Lancelot and has the aesthetics from a knight from the Middle Ages. I like the Mordred and the Galahad Nightmare frames the most besides the Landslide Albion and the Tristan Divider, among the Nightmare frames that belong to the Knights of the Round. And last and certainly not least is the Shenhu. It was a plot device Nightmare frame, but I still liked its unique design, and I like Shin-Kei as a character, so I figured I should mention it here as well. And finally, here is what I consider to be the best Nightmare frame in Code Geass, and that is the Zangetsu. The Nightmare frame of Todo the Miracle Worker is an impressive weapon. I like how it evolved from a custom Gekka that Todo received in Stage 17. The new additions include a built-in float unit and a Radiant Wave Surger as a shield, not as a weapon, and mounted machine guns. The design has a nice black color scheme which covers the entire Nightmare frame, much like the Gekka before it. It's a nice change of pace from the other Nightmare frames which have bright color scheme, at least compared to the custom models. When I see this Nightmare frame in action, it reminds me of the samurai of old. The long hair only helps in this regard. It also reminds me of the Gundam Nodley from 00. Even though it has mounted machine guns, the main weapon dubbed by Todo is the Shadow Longsword. It's a large and powerful weapon, and when used by Todo, it's quite lethal. If you don't believe me, just ask the brainwashed Britannian soldiers or Saku Kurugi himself. I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but Bleach is one of my favorite animes of all time, and Ichigo Zanpakuto is called Zangetsu. Anything that reminds you of Bleach will always land on the top list. But the main reason why this Nightmare frame is on the list is that it's just so cool. I know it's not the strongest, but it's a simple design, and that's what I enjoyed about it. Simple hack and slash close encounter Nightmare frame. And that's the perfect weapon for Todo. And that's it. That's my favorite top 15 Nightmare frames in Code Geass. Like I said in the beginning, this is a simple discussion about the Nightmare frames. If you want me to do more detailed stuff in the future, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoy the content, please like, share, and comment on the video. Check out my blog and anime streaming guide for April. I will have a link in the description below. But now let me ask you guys, what is the strongest Nightmare frame in Code Geass? Or what is your favorite? Or both? Give me your top lists. I love reading them in the comment section below. If you want more content like this, let me know that in the comments as well. And remember, the world is not a dark place, and tomorrow will be a good day. Thanks for watching.